Here's something nobody in Brussels wants to talk about. Right now in 2026, while SpaceX is launching a rocket almost every week, while China is marching toward landing humans on the moon by 2030, while Starlink now has over 10,000 active satellites orbiting the Earth, Europe is still trying to figure out how to get its replacement rocket off the ground reliably. 10,000 satellites. That's not a typo. SpaceX crossed that milestone in March of this year, and in the time it took Europe to get 5 launches out of Ariane 6, SpaceX conducted 165 orbital missions in 2025 alone. Ariane 5, the rocket that carried the James Webb Space Telescope into orbit, retired. Its replacement, Ariane 6, after years of delay, it's barely started flying. And the small launcher Vega C, grounded for over 2 years after a catastrophic failure, only just returning to flight. How did this happen? How did one of the wealthiest political blocs on the planet, home to brilliant engineers and a proud spaceflight legacy, end up watching from the sidelines while the world's most consequential industry transformed around it? The European Space Agency, ESA, was founded in 1975, born from the merger of 2 earlier organizations. From the very beginning, it was built on a political compromise, not a commercial vision. The ESA isn't one country's space agency. It's a coalition of 23 member states, each with its own government, its own aerospace industries, its own political priorities, and its own idea of what success looks like in space. That structure worked fine for decades. The Ariane rocket family became a genuine success story. By the 1990s and early 2000s, Ariane Space, the commercial arm that operates ESA's rockets, controlled roughly 50% of the global commercial launch market. Europe was a legitimate space power. Companies from around the world paid to put their satellites on Ariane rockets because Ariane rockets were reliable, professional, and competitive. But here's what that success actually masked. Europe wasn't building a space industry, it was building a space bureaucracy. Take the fair return principle under this policy. Every member state that contributes money to an ESA program is guaranteed to receive contracts worth roughly what they put in. On the surface, that sounds reasonable. In practice, it's a disaster for efficiency. Instead of awarding contracts to the best, cheapest, or most innovative companies, ESA is obligated to spread work across national industries regardless of whether they're the right fit. The result? A rocket built by committee, with supply chains stretching across a dozen countries, with costs that can never be driven down because the contracts can never truly be competed. Ariane 6, the successor to the beloved Ariane 5, was supposed to cut launch costs in half. Instead, it ended up barely cheaper, if cheaper at all, while taking years longer to develop than planned. Its first successful orbital launch didn't happen until July 2024, roughly 6 years behind the original schedule. By early 2026, Ariane 6 had accumulated just 5 successful flights in 17 months. But that still falls short of the 9 to 10 annual launches the agency is targeting by 2027. Meanwhile, one of its competitors was launching nearly every 2 days. In 2015, SpaceX successfully landed the first orbital-class booster at Cape Canaveral, a used rocket coming back from space, landing on its own legs. It looked like science fiction. It was science fiction, and it broke the economics of the entire launch industry overnight. By reusing boosters, SpaceX didn't just cut costs, it changed the fundamental business model of spaceflight. In 2025, the company launched 165 orbital missions, nearly 3/4 of them dedicated to Starlink flights. Falcon 9 boosters have now successfully landed over 590 times. One booster, B1067, has flown 33 missions. While SpaceX was perfecting that machine, Europe was debating whether reusability was even worth pursuing. ESA's Themis reusability demonstrator is still performing its first top tests from a launch site in Sweden in 2026. It gets worse. When Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, ESA's carefully constructed launch calendar collapsed. The agency had been relying on Russian Soyuz rockets to launch several missions, including satellites in the Galileo navigation constellation. Those Soyuz rockets were pulled overnight, gone, without a replacement in place. Between the Ariane 5 retirement, the Ariane 6 delays, the Soyuz withdrawal, and the Vega C grounding, the ESA found itself in a position that was genuinely embarrassing. It had to pay SpaceX to launch its own Earth observation satellite, Sentinel-6B. The European Space Agency is using an American private rocket company's vehicle to reach orbit. For 2026, the ESA's annual operating budget is 8.26 billion euros. By comparison, NASA's budget for fiscal year 2026 is $24.44 billion. NASA funds a coherent national strategy. The ESA funds 23 national strategies simultaneously. Consider the contrast with China. China's space budget remains deliberately opaque. Analysts estimate it at somewhere between $12 billion and $15 billion annually, and growing, with funding spread across military and civilian channels that are impossible to fully disentangle. In 2003, China became the third country to independently send a human to space. In 2019, it landed on the far side of the moon, something no nation had ever done. In 2021, it established a permanent space station. And in 2030, it plans to land astronauts on the moon. There is a deeper issue lurking beneath all of this, and it's perhaps the most uncomfortable one. Does Europe actually want to be a serious space power? Because the decisions that would be required to truly compete, consolidating national aerospace industries, removing the fair return constraints, and funding a crewed launch vehicle, all of those decisions carry enormous political costs. They mean accepting that the legacy Ariane program, the source of genuine European pride, may not be sufficient for the 21st century. SpaceX has over 10,000 active satellites in orbit simultaneously. The constellation now serves more than 10 million active customers across 160 countries. It provided critical communications infrastructure to Ukrainian forces after Russia's 2022 invasion. It is, by any measure, the most strategically important communications network in the world. Europe has no equivalent. The Iris constellation, Europe's sovereign broadband answer to Starlink, is still under development, with full deployment not expected until the early 2030s. And GPS dependence remains another unresolved issue. Europe's Galileo system is genuinely impressive, more accurate than GPS in some respects, but it took years longer to deploy than planned and remains operationally entangled with infrastructure and devices that default to GPS. True independence is harder to achieve than a working constellation. So, is it over for Europe in space? No, not quite. But the path forward is narrow, and it requires a kind of political courage that Europe's space community hasn't yet been fully given. Ariane 6 is flying. It works. Vega C is targeting a return to flight. The European Launcher Challenge is moving forward, and the ESA's scientific track record remains extraordinary. For Europe to truly compete in the space race of the second quarter of the 21st century, its leaders need to make the hard choices they've been deferring for a decade. Restructure procurement, fund commercial startups at a transformative scale, build a crewed launch capability, remove the political constraints that turn every rocket into a diplomatic negotiation. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe.